Hello everyone! There is actually a strange explanation that has been spreading among people for years, and many of us heard it when we were young, regarding why Japanese people look alike. We always used to hear that their resemblance to one another was caused by the atomic bomb that was dropped on the city of Hiroshima. The truth is that this claim is completely wrong and has no scientific basis whatsoever. The reason some people may have come up with this idea is that they probably confused the effects of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The atomic bomb did cause birth defects in a large number of fetuses that were present at the time of the explosion, but it certainly did not change the appearance of Japanese people as a whole. The biggest proof of that is that the photos you are seeing right now are pictures of Japanese people taken decades before the Hiroshima incident. In other words, the Japanese people already looked like this long before the atomic bomb, so the topic has absolutely nothing to do with it. Welcome to Midnight Tales. In this episode of Midnight Questions, we will answer the question, why do Japanese people look alike? Before we begin, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest videos. To understand the topic properly, let's divide it into two parts. In the first half, we'll explain why Japanese people look alike. In the second half, we'll explain why Japanese people do not look alike. And don't be surprised, because everything will make sense shortly. If I showed you a picture of a Japanese person among pictures of people from different nationalities, you would most likely be able to identify the Japanese person quite easily. And if that tells us anything, it tells us that Japanese people do indeed share certain physical characteristics and common features. If you're wondering why this resemblance exists, let's summarize it in a few points. The peoples of East Asia, whether from Japan, China, Korea, or elsewhere, all share common ancestral origins and belong to the same broad lineage, namely the original Mongolian lineage. The original Mongolian people had distinctive physical features that they were created with from the very beginning. For many centuries, they mostly married within their own groups and had limited mixing with other populations, allowing them to preserve many of their ancestral characteristics over time. These distinctive traits include slanted eyes, straight hair, and relatively small noses. One study suggested that these features may have developed because the ancestors of these populations originally lived in extremely cold regions. Their eye shape may have helped protect them from harsh winds and freezing conditions, while narrower noses may have helped reduce the amount of cold air entering the lungs, allowing them to better maintain body temperature. Another factor contributing to the similarity among these populations is their shared diet, which has traditionally relied heavily on fish and seafood. In fact, some studies suggest that the spread of American fast food in Japan has contributed to noticeable changes in the appearance of younger generations. According to this perspective, changes in diet can gradually influence physical characteristics across generations. For example, if you compare a Japanese person who grew up in the United States with another Japanese person who spent their entire life in Japan, you may feel that the person raised in America looks somewhat different from the one raised in Japan. The main reason is that they grew up with different diets and different environments. In simple terms, Japanese Americans can appear somewhat different from Japanese people living in Japan, and this is something that can often be noticed in many Hollywood movies. So, if you're asking why Japanese people look alike, the short answer is that they have preserved many ancestral characteristics for centuries, while also sharing similar diets, environments, and climatic conditions over long periods of time. Now let's move on to the second half of the topic. Why don't Japanese people look alike? Now, before you find that strange, let me ask you a simple question. Do you think there is a resemblance among the people of other countries? For example, let's take Egypt in Africa. Do Egyptians look alike or not? In other words, is there a degree of resemblance among Egyptians similar to the resemblance we notice among Japanese people? Before you rush to answer, let me tell you that the answer is yes. Egyptians do share many common physical characteristics, just as Japanese people do. In fact, this is not something unique to Egyptians or Japanese people. It is a general pattern that applies to all human populations around the world. Just as Japan, China, and Korea share common ancestral roots, Americans, Europeans, and the peoples of North Africa also share certain common characteristics and belong to broader ancestral groups. Likewise, many populations in southern Africa and Guinea share physical traits and common ancestry as well. There is a famous story that took place in the United States in September 2015. The incident involved a man who came into possession of another person's shopping cart and used it illegally. After some time, the police managed to track down and arrest the suspect. The strange part was that when the police arrested him, he remained standing there, completely confused by what was happening. Even after being taken into custody and questioned at the police station, he kept insisting that he was innocent and had done nothing wrong. What was truly surprising was that after further investigation, the authorities discovered that they had actually arrested the wrong person because he looked remarkably similar to the real suspect they were searching for. And the truth is, police officers are not the only ones who experience situations like this. All of us encounter similar situations almost every day. Whether on television, at airports, or in tourist areas, when we see a group of people with East Asian features, for example, we often feel that they look alike and immediately assume they are Japanese. In reality, they could be Chinese, Korean, or even Indonesian. But that raises an important question: do these people actually look alike, or do they not? A group of researchers in the United States tried to explain this phenomenon and came up with a conclusion known as the cross-race effect. In simple terms, it is a cognitive phenomenon that makes it more difficult for people of one race or ethnic group to recognize and distinguish individuals from another race or ethnic group. For example, many Americans or Europeans may not have had enough exposure to certain foreign populations or enough close interaction with them. As a result, they may feel that all members of that group look alike, even though the differences between them are much greater than they realize. To better understand this idea, let me tell you a story. Imagine that Emma and Aiden have twin daughters. The two girls are almost identical. Over time, however, their parents become able to distinguish between them very easily. The reason is simple: they spend a great deal of time with them. They notice small differences, and their eyes learn to recognize details that ordinary people cannot easily see. Now imagine that Ethan visits Aiden one day. Aiden calls his twin daughters over and says, "Come say hello to your uncle." For Ethan, it would be almost impossible to tell the twins apart or notice any meaningful differences between them. Yet, from the parents' perspective, the girls may look very different from one another, with many obvious distinctions. The key point is that only people who have spent a long time with them can easily recognize those differences. And that is exactly the same idea when it comes to Japanese people. Japanese people do share certain common features. If you walk around Japan, you might even feel as though everyone looks somewhat similar. But as you spend more time with Japanese people, interact with them more often, listen to them, look closely at their faces, and become familiar with them, you begin to realize that they are actually very different from one another. Over time, your ability to distinguish between individuals becomes much stronger and much more accurate. Let's do a quick experiment. We're about to show you pictures of 3 people. Try to guess, are these people Chinese or Japanese? Well, were you able to figure it out? The truth, dear viewer, is that none of the 3 people in those pictures are Japanese or Chinese. All 3 of them are Korean. Yet when many of us see someone with narrow eyes, a flatter nose, and smooth shiny hair, we immediately assume that the person is Japanese. Likewise, many people feel that the populations of Asia look very similar to one another, whether they come from Kazakhstan, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, Uzbekistan, Vietnam, or Malaysia. In reality, every one of these countries has its own unique features and characteristics, and the people from those countries can often distinguish one another very easily. For example, if a Japanese person sees a Korean person, they may immediately recognize that the person is Korean. But if many of us see a Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, Malaysian, or someone from another Asian country, we might simply say, "That's a Japanese person." And perhaps the most surprising part is this. Even though we often say that Japanese people all look alike, many Japanese people feel exactly the same way about us. To them, we may also look alike because we belong to a group they have not been exposed to very often, except perhaps in tourist areas or through limited interaction. Let me tell you about an interesting study. A group of researchers from the University of Glasgow in the United Kingdom decided to investigate this phenomenon. They gathered 2 groups of participants. The first group consisted of people from East Asia, including Japanese, Chinese, and others. The second group consisted of people from outside East Asia, such as Arabs and Europeans. The researchers then showed both groups a series of photographs. Some of the photos contained people from the participants' own ethnic group, while others showed people from ethnic groups that were unfamiliar to them. At the same time, the researchers used brain monitoring equipment to measure the participants' brain activity while viewing the images. What happened was fascinating. Both groups demonstrated the same phenomenon we talked about earlier, the cross-race effect. Participants in both groups took longer to recognize and distinguish people from the unfamiliar ethnic group. Their brains had to work harder and required more time to process and identify those faces. So what do these results mean? Simply put, Europeans or Americans may feel that Japanese people look alike. At the same time, Japanese or Chinese people may feel that Americans look alike as well. This happens because neither group has had enough exposure to the other group to easily recognize subtle facial differences. So yes, Japanese people do share certain common features. But they are not the only ones. People from Southern Africa share common features. Arabs share common features. Europeans share common features as well. And this sense of resemblance becomes even stronger when viewed by someone who is unfamiliar with that group or has not spent enough time around them. Finally, not everyone with narrow eyes and smooth hair is Japanese. And with that, we've answered today's question. Why do Japanese people look alike? If this is your first time visiting the channel, this is a place where we answer the kinds of questions that might pop into your head while you're lying in bed in the middle of the night and can't fall asleep. As always, if there's a question that keeps you awake at night and leaves you wondering, write it in the comments below, and we'll do our best to answer it. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and share it. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest videos. And I'll see you in the next episode. Oh, and one last thing.